Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:07. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company. It's a busy but fun first day of August as this year just flies right on by, but we're holding on for dear life on this roller coaster that is 2024, and thanks for doing it with us. Coming up in just 10 minutes, we're going to speak with Rob O'Donnell, a former NYPD officer who was there on 9/11, and we'll get his very raw and real reaction to the plea deal now for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. At 7:35, Loudoun County Sheriff Mike Chapman on that story of a carjacking that we just discussed. And then at 8:05, KT McFarland. It's Larry O'Connor with the effervescent Mercedes Schlapp doing a bit of a shimmy. You love it when we play the Miami Sound Machine, don't you?
Well, it's not a shimmy, okay? It's like my salsa dancing self, okay?
You know, it's not salsa dancing unless you and Matt do it together.
Shimmy. That's so not Cuban. What's wrong with you people?
That is, in fact, a shimmy. Joining us right now.
It's not a shimmy.
Harrison Fields, speaking on behalf of the Trump campaign, I believe. I don't know. Harrison, are you working for the campaign, or you just want your voice heard on this reaction to yesterday's amazing scene at the National Black Journalists Association?
Well, good morning. I'm a surrogate on the campaign, and like Mercedes, I was shimmying down here in Florida with some Gloria Estefan this morning.
Thank you. It's absolutely a shimmy. Well, listen, Harrison, thanks for joining us because, listen, the reaction to President Trump's appearance yesterday with the National Association of Black Journalists has been all over the map. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I have seen this script play out before since 2015. I've been told by all the smart people here in D.C., it's like, oh, my gosh, Trump can't say that. Trump can't behave that way. That's the end of his campaign. But I saw a man who was fearless, who knew he was going to go into hostile territory, who was treated pretty shabbily from the get-go, and he was just very real, very genuine, and very Trump.
Right, and these attacks are so tiresome, and being a black and Hispanic Republican, I get this all the time, and I watch the whole thing. And the reality is a couple things. The left never freaks out when a black Republican like Tim Scott is called the Bettina of race and diversity by Joy Reid. There's silence. Mm-hmm. If that was ever said about Cory Booker or any other black Democrat, the left would be on fire like they are today. The other thing is Donald Trump, as we all know, is an equal opportunity offender. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, purple, or gray. He is going to offend you if you offend him. In the hostile territory that we all witnessed yesterday was disgusting. And I was an assistant press secretary for the last 8 months of the administration, and I went into the White House briefing room often with Kayleigh. When I tell you the hostility and vitriol of that room, you could feel it. You as soon as you sat down in the chair, you were extremely tense. This is how the media treats the right. They don't like us. They report negative stories all the time about us, and they treat us extremely hostile. So what we saw by Rachel Scott, who is a friend who I've worked with professionally for years, who for many times has been good to me, but what she displayed yesterday was very sad, and I think the American people saw the true winner in that conversation, and that was Donald Trump.
Well, let me ask you, Harrison, because, at 5 o'clock in the morning, Larry decides to ask me the question, well, what would you have done or what would you have said to the president? Because what's happened is obviously the stories coming out of it has given Kamala Harris an opportunity to say, well, this is why Trump is so divisive and disrespectful, right? So, I mean, was it a actual win for the president? You think when you actually see the video, the president comes across being the normal one out of the group. But I mean, do you think it hurts him in any way with black voters?
No, because at the end of the day, I think black voters are no longer attached to this emotional argument when it comes to race. I think they know that we're in 2024 and instead of 1944, and they're not tripping up over these narratives. The reality is black voters want a few things. They want to feel safe, they want more money in their pocket, and they don't want an open border that's taken over their child's school, in a city like Baltimore when the 8th grade reading level is at 3rd grade reading level and you've got illegal immigrants pouring into their schools. They can care less about the rhetoric on the campaign trail. So, black people are smarter than the media gives them credit. They're not going to get tripped up over these stupid narratives about what Trump did or did not do. All they want to know is who's going to make life better for them. And we know it's not Kamala Harris, and we know it wasn't Joe Biden. And most Black Americans and Hispanic Americans are looking towards Trump.
Actually, Harrison, I want to take a different angle on this. I don't think this has much to do with black voters. I think this has to do with white voters, most specifically white suburban women who don't want to, don't want to appear mean, who don't like the mean tweets, right? Who like to fashion themselves as the allies to those poor black women who were paraded by Donald Trump. Yes, this is the perspective they're going to bring to the table. They're looking at this saying, why is he being so rude? Why is he challenging Kamala Harris's racial identity? Who is he to say whether she's black or not? I think this actually makes him potentially, if he's vulnerable on this issue yesterday, it's not to the black voters, it's to these white sort of quasi, maybe liberal, maybe not women who just want everybody to get along.
Right. Well, this is why I'm on the show, and Tim Scott, please stand up, because we're happy to go on TV. We're happy to go on radio. And when Joe Biden told us 4 years ago that we aren't black if we didn't vote for him, what do suburban moms have to say about that? Because this is happening on both sides. And honestly, the right is getting it way worse than the left. As a black and Hispanic Republican, the things that are said about me are ridiculous. In 2 months, Mercedes knows I'm welcoming a baby girl into this world who's going to be biracial. And the comments on my post were, oh, you're about to birth a new coon into this world. How disgusting is that? It's disgusting. Yeah. And this is the left. This is what the left does to people that look like me, people that look like Mercedes because she's a Cuban American. This is what we are, a threat to the left. And the more that they see of us, the more that they hear of us, the worse it's going to be for them, because we can't exist in their world, because we're supposed to be attached to the hip, because, they're somehow our saviors. They are not. They've done nothing but install regressive policies that have never been intended to better us, only to keep us steady enough to be dependent on their policies, black and brown communities across this country for over a century.
Harrison, Mercedes earlier said that, if this campaign's about policy, Trump's going to win. If it's about racial politics and racial identity, that plays into Kamala Harris's favor. Did Donald Trump yesterday help Kamala Harris make this about race? Did he give her an assist in focusing on racial identity?
Listen, were there sound bites that Kamala Harris is going to take, and, she's going to take a break from her brat campaign to hype up this racial division? Sure. There may have been a soundbite or two, but the reality is the American people, especially Black America, they're like, okay, well, give me more context. What is this about? Yeah. And they're also going to be like, okay, where was Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris was MIA. She did not dedicate 1 hour of her schedule to fly to Chicago to talk to black journalists. Yeah. And she also wasn't there at the National Religious Broadcasters Association that Donald Trump went to a couple months ago. She is taking a basement strategy. She's going to controlled environments with a teleprompter and talking about how she was some great prosecutor. Meanwhile, she doesn't talk about her record of letting rapists free, letting drug dealers free, letting murderers free, and also presiding over a border in which young women are being raped every single day at the southern border. So spare me the progressive, prosecutor who's over here trying to be a savior for women when women are being raped, every single day. And not to mention, she wants to abolish ICE. She wants to abolish the police. She wants to get rid of red meat. So this woman is dangerously liberal. She's extremely out of touch. I just saw a video on MSNBC yesterday of a Hispanic woman that said, I don't know her, I don't trust her. And from what I can tell, she is going to be extremely radical and extremely leftist. They don't want it. The more you see a Kamala Harris, the less you're going to like of her. And the second they understand what her record is and what she stands on, the American people are going to be turning back to Trump.
Harrison Fields is going to be a busy man today, and I appreciate you carving out some time for us this morning in the nation's capital. Thank you, Harrison.
Thank you both. Take care.
Go back to that Miami shimmy now. Everybody's doing it. It's
I do it better than most.
Rob O'Donnell coming up in a moment. Talk about 9/11. First, though, let's check in with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Mervis flies to Africa for your diamond so you don't have to. The best value is at Mervis Diamond Importers.
When word came down yesterday that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had reached a plea agreement with the Biden administration, I thought of several people I knew connected to 9/11, and one of them is Rob O'Donnell. He's a New York police officer who was there that day, now radio host for the Rob O'Donnell Show in central Pennsylvania. Hey, Rob, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Larry, thanks for having me.
I know you're in constant contact with the families of the victims of that day who lost a loved one in the attacks on America, but also many of those who were injured in the aftermath and the cleanup of Ground Zero that you participated in. So what's going on when you saw this story? What are they all saying to you?
It was like a gut punch to everyone. I mean, word got out pretty quickly. I found out on the air. I got a press release from the Department of Defense that this plea agreement was going through. And listen, just a couple of months ago, I received a request if I wanted to go down and witness and cover this trial. So this was just a couple of months ago. It looks like that the judge canceled hearings back in December of 2022. Starting in March of 2022, plea negotiations with this administration and these defendants began, and it was the trial was delayed in the end of 2022 because of those plea agreements. And Air Force military judge Colonel Matthew McCall, it was the intent of this administration to reach a plea deal. Now, some of the back channel chatter that I'm hearing from families that have spoken to members of Congress, spoken to senators, and spoken to this administration said that, the Biden administration, Biden himself wanted to see this kind of end his legacy. Osama bin Laden was killed while he was vice president under Obama, and him just getting a plea deal and ending this court case, he saw as a win, and his team was told to push to go with that.
Rob, the part of this letter, it said that in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table, the three will plead guilty to all charges, including the murder of 2,976 people. They will be sentenced by a panel of military officers. It just sounds insane to me that you have terrorists who are war criminals who should not even be alive because they've been part of killing Americans, and yet this is quote unquote justice. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and we were given as first responders, as family members and friends of those that we lost that day and that have worked down there that day and the months following. We were told this was a military tribunal. This wasn't a court this wasn't a domestic court system. There's going to be justice. Remember, I guess we do now negotiate with terrorists, right?
I guess we do. Yeah.
And the worst possible terrorists, by the way. I mean, listen, if what Khalid Sheikh Mohammed did doesn't warrant some level of real justice and real punishment, then what does? And it makes you wonder why the Bush administration was pushed in such an aggressive way to not wage this as a war, but adjudicate it as a criminal action. And that's what they did with KSM. They got him alive, they arrested him, and they brought him in. And here's how it ends up. I mean, the terrorists take this as a message that there are no consequences, ultimately, for doing the absolute worst thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you bring that up, Larry, because I was just looking yesterday. It was just released finally from the government that the two Jordanians that were here illegally that tried to break into Quantico, posing as Amazon drivers with a box truck, they were released on bail July 22nd. Now, we don't know the real intent of these individuals, but they tried entering a Marine base, one of our most secure Marine bases, under the pretense of falsehood, saying they were Amazon drivers with a box truck. They were released on bail, and we just find out about it yesterday, and they were released since July 22nd from an Alexandria judge.
One thing, why would it take over a decade for this to reach to the point of a plea deal in terms of these 9/11 conspirators?
I wish I could answer that. Liz, I spoke to some family members last night that were actually flown down to Guantanamo Bay to give victim statements, to hear some of the testimony. This was just a couple of months ago. And we were always led to believe that justice would be served here, that this would never be forgotten. Well, I could tell you without a doubt, the way I feel, the way my brothers and sisters feel that work down there and the family members feel is we were forgotten yesterday on July 31st.
We're speaking with Rob O'Donnell, police officer for the New York Police Department, the day of 9/11. And quickly, Rob, I know the Biden administration is going to start pointing fingers, and they're going to throw up their hands. And they're going to say, hey, this was a military thing. This was a JAG thing. We had no involvement. But as commander-in-chief, it stresses credulity that Joe Biden, the president, the commander-in-chief, the person in charge of the military, didn't have some kind of sign-off here. If he didn't want this to happen, he could have said no.
Yeah, the timing of this is very unusual. The fact that, like I said, it was a gut punch to all of us who got the notification. We didn't know this. We didn't see this coming down the road. Like I said, just a couple months ago, I was asked if I wanted to provide credentials to go down there to cover and witness it. Right. So it dumbfounds me that this took so long, Mercedes. It dumbfounds me that we're still talking about this. We're still paying for the upkeep and maintenance of these terrorists, these savages who killed not just Americans, but anyone who was there.
Okay. Do you think part of this is that they viewed this from almost like a national security level? Like, if we give them the death penalty, if they are killed, then that would be, making them into martyrs and retaliation from ISIS?
I'm sure that, that conversation does have to happen. I'm not naive to that. And even looking at it, I tried to wrap my head around this last night. And okay, say they were put to death, say they were executed. Does that change anything for me? Does that bring anyone back? Does that give justice to the daughters and sons who are now in their 20s who grew up without their moms and dads? Moira Smith, one of the NYPD officers who I worked with Moira as cops together, and I worked with her husband, Officer Jimmy Smith. He made a quote yesterday for the paper, and he just said, the prosecution and families have waited 23 years to have our day in court and put on record what these animals did to our loved ones. And, that's someone who's lived this, whose daughter has grown up without their mom because the daughter was only an infant when she passed that day.
I know that you're affected by this personally, Rob, but I also know that it's going to motivate you to continue to kick butt on the Rob O'Donnell Show and be an advocate and a voice for all those people. So I appreciate you joining us and doing that today here in the nation's capital. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Mercedes, have a great morning.
Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36. It's O'Connor and Company, and we've got a busy first day of August here ahead of us. Thanks for joining us. At 8:05, KT McFarland will be our guest. I'm Larry O'Connor, and that's Mercedes Schlapp. Good morning, Mercedes.
Good morning.
We're joined right now by the sheriff of Loudoun County, Mike Chapman. We talked about this story yesterday and a little bit earlier today. This was a carjacking in Sterling at a 7-Eleven that ended up with the death of an innocent bystander, a mother, a grandmother, and now we have the suspect in custody, Jose Aguilar Martinez, who is an illegal immigrant in the country from El Salvador, but with a California driver's license. So let's try to flesh this out a bit more with Sheriff Chapman. Thank you for joining us, Sheriff.
Well, thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me on, you and Mercedes. Thank you.
Do we know how long this person has been in the country, when they entered? I mean, to have a California driver's license suggests that they've been here for a while. Why was he here? Has he been deported in the past? What do we know?
I believe he's been here in the country for several years. I don't know exactly how long, but I do know it's been several years, and he was out in this area because he does have some family out this way in Sterling.
And has there been any interaction with ICE up until now? Has he had any other legal wranglings or arrests or any sort of encounters with law enforcement?
No, there was no. The only other encounter that he had with law enforcement was with us back in June when he was arrested for drunk in public, and that's just a civil offense and a civil fine. So we notify ICE on every arrest that we make like that to see if they come up in their system, and he had no record on file. So I guess there was no reason to believe he was any kind of a violent criminal or anything like that. There was just nothing. There was nothing for ICE to come and hold him on or anything like that. So he got released the next day when he sobered up. That's the only record that we know of, in which he's been arrested before.
So what happens next? Obviously he is in the detention center. Will this go to court? Will ICE take him? I mean, what's the next step in this process?
Well, so he had an initial appearance, and then he's got another hearing coming up in September. So he certainly has been charged with carjacking, but that particular charge is going to be superseded by several other charges as well, to include homicide. So that's going to all happen in September. As far as ICE goes and the detainer goes, it's likely that he'll get tried here, and we certainly hope he gets convicted. It's such a heinous crime, and then after he serves a sentence, I believe that would be when he would get deported. We really don't want to have him deported at this point because we're just afraid he would cross over the border. That's the indication. There's no record on file that he must have just can't come over the border like a godaway, and no record at all on him, aside from the fact that he had a California driver's license.
Sheriff Mike Chapman's our guest. Is this, we've seen these reports mostly in Fairfax County recently, Sheriff Chapman, and I know that this 7-Eleven, ironically, is sort of literally right on the border of Fairfax and Loudoun County, but has there been an increase or uptick of arrests made of illegal immigrants in your county recently?
Well, all I can tell you is Larry, it seems to be. I can't really say that for sure. I can tell you that in the past 2 federal fiscal years, we had 479 people that we arrested that we referred to ICE, and they put detainers on about. Well, they put detainers on them about 200 of those people they picked up, and about close to 100 were deported. So we have a very active engagement with ICE. We want to make sure that we do everything in our power as far as immigration laws go, and what they do after that, we don't really have a lot of control over. But we certainly make our notifications so that they can follow up and hopefully get these people out of the country that shouldn't be here.
Pat Harity, a supervisor in Fairfax County, was quoted yesterday in local media by saying if you're a U.S. citizen and a violent offender, you're treated worse than if you're in the country illegally and a violent offender. Now, maybe that's specific to the Fairfax Commonwealth's attorney, Steve Descano, but there is this feeling among American citizens, Sheriff Chapman, that maybe you can shed some law enforcement expertise on, that there is deference being paid in some way to criminals if they are non-citizens.
Yeah, Larry, I can't. It disturbs me when I look at the area surrounding us and the policies that they have when it comes to those that are here illegally. I can tell you that I feel like it's important that we work with all of our law enforcement counterparts. It's a force multiplier when we utilize everybody else's assets as well as ours to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to the maximum extent of the law. And we can only do what we can do, which is what we did in this particular case, obviously, is notify ICE, and then certainly because this was such a heinous, violent, unspeakable crime here, that they did their job and were able to determine, to the best of our knowledge, that he was in from El Salvador. So these are the things that we try to do in law enforcement. It's a force multiplier when we all work together. I think it really is disheartening when I look at some of the areas that surround the Washington D.C. area and their lack of engagement with these other entities that can actually help them prevent crime. I think it's really a disservice to our citizens when we don't leverage those assets. And because in this particular case, this guy should have never even been in the country, and here he is. Right. It takes the life of a 54-year-old woman, a mom, a grandmom. I mean, she was here for all the right reasons. She was checking on her mom who was in a nursing and rehab home. I mean, she's doing all the right things, and here this 22-year-old who should have never been in this country takes her life. I mean, it's just so horrific and such. I really don't have the words for it. I mean, I feel so bad for Melody's family, and it's just horrific. Very sad.
Can I get your reaction to Fairfax County Sheriff Stacy Kincaid, who's not going to honor the ICE detainers? Basically, Kincaid explains she requires ICE to get a judicial warrant even for violent offenders who are in the U.S. Illegally. Is that the case? In the surrounding areas as well?
So the way detainers work, it's an administrative action. So what they do is it's a request by ICE. Normally, that's the way it's kind of perceived. There's no judicial requirement there. So basically, you don't have to honor it. Based on a ruling by Mark Herring that came out, probably 8 years ago on that. So what we do when we have anybody in custody, first of all, we run them. We run everybody that we arrest, and then if they come up as a non-U.S. citizen, we go ahead and we notify ICE, obviously, and they make a determination based on their set of circumstances whether or not they're going to come out and pick them up. We do everything that we can to hold on to these people as long as we can so that ICE can get out here. We don't have the legal authority to hold on to them for past any kind of their judicial hearings or whatever. But if we know, for example, that somebody's going to get let out like in 2 days from now, and we're concerned that they might be a danger to society and they're here illegally, we'll notify ICE well in advance so they can come out and be waiting at the door when this person is released. So that's what we do. We do everything in our legal power with the authority that we have to hold on to people as long as we possibly can judicially, and then release them to ICE.
We keep hearing from D.C. politicians that crime is actually down nationwide, and that the influx of illegal immigrants that we've seen, millions across the southern border completely unvetted, has not made a difference in the crime issues. As a person who actually has to deal with this on a day-to-day basis, does that square with you? Or let me ask the question a different way, maybe, that can be clearer. Does the current administration's border policy make your job as the sheriff of Loudoun County easier, harder, or no difference at all?
No, certainly it makes it harder, Larry. And the fact is that it's just another obstacle that we have in trying to prevent crime and help our citizens out and hold people accountable for committing crime. Maybe the numbers are down depending on how your crime is calculated. But the fact is that what I'm seeing when you look across the country and you see some of these instances of this very, very violent crime that's being committed by those that should never even have been in this country, it really is concerning to me, and I think it should be concerning to everybody out there.
Well said, in a much more judicious and even-handed way than I would, but that's why I'm not going to be sheriff of any county anytime soon. Mike Chapman serves Loudoun County very well. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Larry Mercedes. Appreciate it.
We've got a developing story now breaking out of Russia. The Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who had been arrested and charged and convicted for espionage in a Russian court, is reportedly free. He has been released as part of a massive prisoner swap. He was sentenced to 16 years in a Russian prison. He's been a cause that journalists and many Americans beyond the media have been rallying around. Apparently, he is now on his way to New York. A very happy ending, it appears, for Evan. The details of that prison swap have yet to be released. We'll try to get details of it as soon as we get it, and we'll also speak with K2 McFarland coming up next about this very issue.